Kamartaj, Kathmandu, Nepal, August 14, 2012. I was just starting to sweat in my winter robes and knee-high leather boots when I stored the cloth-wrapped bundle holding the leftover potato pancakes and mincemeat dumplings from my lunch in one of the large side pouches on my backpack, buckling the flap down to secure it before double-checking the identical pouch on the opposite side that currently held my water-filled thermos. I had already stuffed a spare robe and 2 extra pairs of thick wool socks down in the bottom of the central compartment to help cushion the weight of my heavy flashlight, since I would need both hands free to use my sling ring. The smaller front pouch currently held few spare filters for my mask, which was sitting next to my backpack on top of my unmade bed. Well, I'm about as ready to go as I am likely to get, I thought to myself, glancing around the room to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything. And even with the 5-hour difference, the sun should have risen in the Alps by now. All that's left is to. I was just starting to reach for my filter mask to put it on when the wind outside shifted, giving me just enough time to catch the scent of someone standing in the hallway outside my room before they gave my door a timid knock. Worried that I might have been caught even though I wasn't technically breaking any of the rules they had here, I quickly grabbed one of the straps of my backpack and swung it out of sight under my bed, before flipping the blanket over to cover my filter mask. Instinctively silencing my boot steps as I made my way across the room, I paused for a moment to analyze the scent coming from the other side of the door, trying to place who it belonged to. It lacked Baron Mordo's scent of cardamom and sandalwood, instead having a very distinct smell of coconut oil and jasmine that did not belong to any of the servants that I was familiar with, though I had come across it quite often during my time here in Kamartaj. Quickly reciting a silent mantra to calm my nerves, I finally reached out to open the door, revealing a slightly taller dark-haired woman standing on the other side. It took me a brief moment to recognize my fellow apprentice in her new crimson robes, as the last time I had spent any amount of time around her had been while we were both still novices, where she had spent most of our lesson on sling rings opening portals to the beach. Judging by how pale her skin was, she must not have been spending as much time out in the sun as I had, though I could tell by the way that her weight remained balanced on the balls of her feet that she must have already had extensive martial arts training before coming here. I wasn't alone in my observation, however, as I caught her own hazel eyes examining me in turn as we stood there awkwardly on either side of the open doorway. "Is there something I can help you with?" I asked, breaking the silence. "Oh, yeah, sorry for staring like that," she apologized, speaking with a distinct British accent. "It's just, the other students think you're just short, but you actually look a lot younger up close like this." "That's because I am young," I admitted, giving her a hooded gaze. Sorry, she apologized again, raising a placating hand. "What I meant to say is thank you for fixing my camera, as it really means a lot to me, and my heart nearly broke with it. I'm sorry it took me so long to come and thank you. I've been struggling a bit in my studies since they made me an apprentice here, but I just wanted to make sure I was able to thank you before you left." "What? Leave?" I asked her. "What do you mean, leave? I'm not going anywhere." She stood there with an incredulous expression on her face for a few seconds, looking down to examine the thick winter robes and non-standard leather boots that I was currently wearing, before looking over my shoulder to focus on something behind me. Turning my head so that I could find out what she was looking at, I quickly spotted one of the wide leather straps of my backpack sticking out from underneath the bed frame in plain sight. "It's not like that," I told her, forcing myself to remain calm. "No, it's okay, I understand," she said, giving me a sympathetic look. "I know they've been treating you really harsh here ever since you almost killed Master Mordo." "No, seriously, what?" I thought to myself, my mind blanking a bit as I tried to follow her chain of logic. "A lot of us have seen you walking back to your room after your training sessions with the Ancient One looking like you've been put through a real meat grinder," she continued, looking both ways down the hallway to make sure nobody was listening. "And now they have you fixing people's broken stuff for them, and doing regular school work, instead of giving you the time to learn magic like the rest of us. So I understand why you feel like you need to leave, and maybe you do need some space for yourself, but I just want you to know that you're not alone, and if you need someone to talk to, I'm willing to listen." Once my brain finally had a chance to reboot, I started to go back over the 6 weeks that had passed since the Ancient One had taken over my morning training. The sound of my palms slapping against my forehead punctuated the moment I realized just how bad things must have looked from an outside perspective, and how a lot of those looks and whispers from my fellow students had been from sympathy, instead of jealousy. Taking a deep breath, I allowed my hand to slide down my face, before dropping down to my side as I let out a heartfelt sigh. I then opened my eyes to look at my fellow apprentice, who was now watching me with a worried expression on her face. Let me get this straight, I finally said, breaking the awkward silence. Everyone thinks that the Ancient One has been punishing me for, almost killing, Master Mordo? It's kind of obvious, she replied, folding her arms under her chest and rocking back on a heel, looking rather uncomfortable. I've seen you stumbling back to your room here with your robes all cut up and bloody, and I know from experience what that kind of damage does to the human body. I just can't figure out how she gets you all healed up before letting you go for the day, since I've never seen you visit doctor any of the times I was stuck in there. I heal fast, I replied faintly, reaching a hand up to tug at the base of my ponytail. Like, really fast. The Ancient One isn't punishing me, she's training me. For what? She asked, incredulous, arms uncrossing so that she could toss her hands up in the air. How to be a better punching bag? You don't have to accept that level of abuse. It's not goddess, okay. I paused to take another deep breath, holding a hand up to let her know to give me a moment. The whole reason why the Ancient One took over my training is because I've already spent most of my life being taught how to fight. And for the record, I have been learning magic. Lots of magic. Bollocks, she replied, shaking her head and crossing her arms again. First off, if you were that good, I would have at least heard about you during my time in the tournaments. Second, when was the last time you learned anything about magic? I don't see a single book on magic in that stack of books sitting on your desk, and I've seen the amount of homework Master Khan has been grading for you. I stood there trembling in frustration for several long seconds, trying to figure out the best way to convince my fellow apprentice that I wasn't being abused, in spite of the apparent mountain of evidence to the contrary. Narrowing my eyes at her, I slowly reached over to pluck my unfortunate teacup from the corner of my desk, taking a moment to roll the glazed ceramic around on the palm of my hand as I made up my mind about what to do. So, you want to see what kind of magic I've been learning, do you? I asked, before throwing the teacup down at the floor between us, causing pieces of ceramic to fly across the room as it shattered against the hard stone. Let me show you some magic. Doing my best to ignore the way that my guest had fallen into a familiar defensive stance with a pair of mandala shields over her raised fists, I focused my attention on the once more broken remains of my teacup, deliberately going through the full set of motions to form the familiar mandala of the repair spell. Bands of eldritch energy formed around my forearm as I took control of the spell with my right hand, and within moments the scattered pieces of ceramic flew back together, leaving a fully repaired teacup sitting on the floor between us. My fellow apprentice's mandala shields fell apart in a shower of orange sparks as I knelt down to grab my teacup, and I couldn't help but smirk at the shocked expression that I saw on her face when I stood back up. Reaching out to place the teacup in one of her outstretched hands, I gently curled her fingers around the glazed ceramic before letting it go. That's how I fixed your camera, I explained, watching as she stared down at the repaired teacup, her mouth open in shock. Without tools, spare parts, or even a manual. Just magic. There was a long moment of silence, during which my fellow apprentice's wide-eyed gaze alternated between my no doubt smug grin, and the teacup she was holding in her hand. It seemed that I had finally managed to prove to her that I was in fact still learning magic, in spite of my current academic workload. But, you just, and then, she muttered, letting out a weary sigh as she pinched the bridge of her nose with her free hand, before lowering it to give me an apologetic look. I'm sorry about all of this. It's just, things have been a bit rough for me recently, between breaking my camera, and getting yelled at by Master Caecilius because I'm still struggling with some of the concepts we're supposed to be learning, and then I heard the rumor that you were leaving, and I'm sorry, I guess it just kind of all boiled up when you answered the door, and I haven't even introduced myself. I'm Zara, by the way. Laura, I replied, feeling a bit bad myself as I shook her hand. Don't worry about it, we've all had days like that. Thanks, Zara replied, releasing my hand and looking back down at the teacup again. So, I know we kind of got off on the wrong foot here, and I can't seem to keep mine out of my mouth right now, but, can I ask what's really going on, if you're not getting punished like I thought? I let out a half-hearted laugh, before reaching out to gently take the teacup from her hand, placing it back on the corner of my desk as I stepped back over to my bed to take a seat next to my blanket-covered filter mask. Sure, why not, I told her, shrugging off my thick outer robe to keep myself from getting too hot while we talked. Close the door and take a seat. Okay, Zara said, stepping inside and gently closing the door behind herself, before taking a seat at my desk. She was just beginning to nervously pluck at a loose thread on one of her sleeves when I started to talk. Are you familiar with the concept of photographic memory? I asked, breaking the awkward silence. where someone can take a single glance at a page of text, and be able to recite it word for word even days later? Zara replied, looking a bit confused. I've heard of people with an eidetic memory, I've even met a few during my time at the university, and I know that there are a lot of different methods that can be used to improve memorization. But I have never come across a single confirmed case of photographic memory in any of the studies that I have read on the subject. Well, I have some good news for you then, I told her with a grin. I know of at least 2 people in this world with a photographic memory, and one of them is sitting right in front of you. You're kidding me, right? Zara asked, a skeptical look on her face. Not at all, I assured her. The reason you don't see any books on magic sitting on my desk is that I have already memorized all of the books that Master Khan will allow an apprentice to read on their own. While I could spend my time studying more advanced tomes under his direct supervision, I am still working to perfect the repair spell I just showed you. So, you're already that far ahead of me, Zara said, her shoulders slumping in defeat. But, I don't understand, if you're able to learn all of this stuff in just a few months, why do you have a stack of secondary school books sitting on your desk? There was a long moment of silence as I bit my lower lip, trying to figure out the best way to answer that question without telling her that I was born in a secret government facility, where I spent most of my life being trained to be an assassin. I grew up in a remote area, I told her, deciding to give her a believable half-truth, rather than outright lying to her. There weren't any schools nearby, and I didn't have access to the internet, so I ended up spending most of my time learning martial arts instead. And that's how you ended up being good enough to beat Master Mordo in a fight, Zara realized. He wasn't bringing you to the Ancient One for punishment, he was doing it because he didn't have anything left to teach you, and she ended up taking over your morning training. Pretty much, I admitted. I've definitely learned a lot from the Ancient One already, although recently I've had to start training on my own, since most of the Ancient One's time has been taken up with her other duties over the last few weeks, and none of the other apprentices seem interested in training with me. Yeah, well, you kind of have a bit of a reputation, Zara pointed out, before wincing. So do I, really, once word got around that I used to compete in international tournaments. Only the masters are willing to spar with me more than once, but most of them are usually busy training entire groups of students, except for Master Caecilius, of course. I suppressed a wince of my own as she mentioned the man who would eventually betray and kill the Ancient One. I've seen a few of Master Caecilius' so-called training sessions, I told her, shaking my head in disgust. I have no idea why they ever put him in charge of teaching people how to fight. I could teach his class better than he can. So could I, Zara replied, before giving me a thoughtful look. You know, I've been learning martial arts for longer than you've probably been alive, but if you're good enough to take on Master Mordo, I wouldn't mind giving you a chance. Maybe I'll finally be able to concentrate on my studies if I'm not spending as much time laying on my back on the hospital wing. That's the second time she's mentioned having to spend time recovering from injuries received during training, I realized, an uncomfortable picture forming inside my head as I went back over the details of our conversation. If she's good enough to fight in an actual tournament, which she'd almost have to be if she's been training for that long, then there's no reason she should be getting injured often enough for it to affect her studies, unless... A chill went up my spine, in spite of the warm winter robes cooled around my waist, as I realized that Master Caecilius must be purposely injuring her in order to prove his superiority over my fellow apprentice. Judging by the fact that I wasn't the only one that sat alone in the dining hall during meal times, I could only assume that he then took the opportunity to publicly humiliate her once she started falling behind in her studies, causing the other apprentices to avoid her lest they suffer the same treatment. No wonder she thought I was leaving, I thought, looking down at my hands as I knitted my fingers together in my lap. With the way that Caecilius has been treating her, it would be easy for her to believe that she's not the only one being abused here. Now that she knows that I'm not actually being punished by the Ancient One, she's not just asking to train with me in order to make sure that I'm not going to run away, she's finally seeing a way to escape her own horrible situation. By this point everyone knows that I'm good enough to take on Baron Mordo, which means that Caecilius won't be able to claim that she is receiving inferior training from me in order to demand that she return to his own abusive lessons. As much as I wish I could give Caecilius a taste of his own medicine, apprentices weren't allowed to challenge the masters to personal combat, and the only reason why I was able to get away with fighting Baron Mordo was because he was the one to issue the challenge in the first place. But, looking up at the expectant expression on Zara's face, I already knew that the easiest way to beat her so-called master was to prove how great she could really be. You know what, that sounds like a wonderful idea, I said, finally breaking the silence. It's hard to get any better while training on your own, and I'm sure that we both have something we can learn from each other. Really? Zara said, a relieved grin growing on her face. How soon can we get started? How about tomorrow morning? I offered with a small grin of my own. Great, sounds good, Zara agreed, getting up from the chair. Meet you in the dining hall during breakfast then. I'll be there, I promised, shrugging my upper robe back on as I stood up myself. Now, if you don't mind, I was actually about to head out for a bit to get some practice in with my repair spell. Oh, right, I'd better get back to my own studies as well, Zara replied with a small blush as she opened the door to leave. I'm glad we finally got a chance to talk, I'm really looking forward to training with you tomorrow. Thank you again for letting me know what's really going on, even after I went off on you like that earlier. Don't worry about it, I assured her, following her as she stepped out into the hallway so that I could lean against the doorframe. I've been spending so much time with my head stuck in a book that I wasn't even aware that people thought that I was getting punished in the first place. If anything, I should be thanking you for bringing it to my attention. Zara stood there for a moment nibbling on her bottom lip, obviously weighing her next words carefully before asking her next question. Do you mind if I let some of the other students know what's really going on? Zara asked me, nervously crossing her arms beneath her chest as she had earlier. Maybe quell some of the rumors, let people know it's okay to talk to you without having to worry about getting punished themselves. You know what, sure, I agreed, knowing that it would be at least as much for her benefit as well, once people saw the two of us spending time together. And, if they have any doubts, you could always refer them to Master Mordo. Hey, that's a good idea, Zara said, perking up a bit at the thought. Well, anyways, I've really got to go now, I'm going to be late enough for Master Hammer's class as it is. See you tomorrow morning. Bright and early, I replied, shaking my head as she narrowly avoided hitting a blue-robed novice during her mad dash down the hallway, before stepping back into my room and firmly closing and latching the door. Taking a moment to readjust my robes to make sure that they were settled correctly, and double-checking that my sling ring was still secured to my woven leather belt above my right hip, I then stepped back over to my bed so that I could reach down and grab the straps of my backpack. It took a few jostles to pull the leather pack out from where it had gotten stuck beneath the bed frame, but once it was free I gave its contents one final check before slinging on my back, settling the strap securely on my robe-clad shoulders. Flipping the covers aside, I then picked up the filter mask, giving it a quick inspection before pulling it on over my head. I had to fight with my ponytail for a moment when it got tangled in the straps, and it felt a bit strange to be wearing it again after spending so many months without it on, but I figured it would be a good idea to wear it anyways, since I had no idea how much dust there might be floating around inside the long abandoned base. Alright, the sun should have definitely risen in the Alps by now, I thought, plucking my sling ring from my belt and sliding it on the first two fingers of my left hand. Now, as long as there aren't any more interruptions. I stood there waiting in the middle of my room for several heartbeats, anticipating another knock at my door, before deciding that the coast was clear. Holding my hands out towards the middle of my room, I then closed my eyes so that I could focus my full attention on my destination, picturing the large metal-walled room with the window-filled arch overlooking snow-capped mountains. Orange light filtered through my eyelids as the initial sparks of dimensional energy started following the sweeping circle I was forming in the air with my right hand, the portal taking longer to form as I was having to rely on my somewhat faded memories of the destination that I had only seen before in a movie. I was just starting to wonder if it wasn't going to work when the light behind my eyelids turned from orange to white, and I immediately grateful that I had decided to wear my winter robes when a chilling breeze blew in through the newly formed portal. I had to squint my eyes for a moment when I opened them to look out upon the ruined remains of Schmidt's office, the early morning sun glaring off the brilliantly white snow covering the surrounding mountainsides, but even at a quick glance I could tell that the last 70 years hadn't been kind to the abandoned base. However, judging by the fact that nobody else had come by to clean the place up, it didn't seem likely that anyone else had moved in to take the base over after the SSR got done ransacking the place. Well, there's only one way to know for sure, I muttered to myself as I finally stepped through the portal. You know, I really should have said some kind of catchphrase when I did that. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.